Welcome to the Echoes of Ihsan podcast. Today, we're going deep, diving deep into Sahih Muslim Book 8, the hadiths that focus on marriage. And wow, you've sent over quite a collection. I say we're going to be exploring a lot, everything from the encouragement to marry to some really practical advice on navigating married life.
It is a fascinating collection, I think, offering a glimpse into how marriage was understood and practiced at the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him.
Yeah, okay, so like right off the bat, the first thing that really jumps out at me is this um, strong encouragement to get married. Like it seems like it's a pretty central concept.
It is. Marriage is a fundamental institution in Islam, and the Prophet, peace be upon him, actively encouraged it, particularly for those who had the means to support a wife. He emphasized its benefits, describing it as a way to restrain one's gaze from unlawful attractions and safeguard oneself from immorality.
Yeah, and there's that hadith where the Prophet, peace be upon him, he's speaking directly to a group of young men, and he says, if you can afford it, get married. It's just a straightforward message.
Yeah.
It really emphasizes how important this is.
Absolutely. The directness of the Prophet's message, peace be upon him, really highlights the importance placed on marriage within the Islamic tradition. It's not just a social contract, it's a path to spiritual growth and fulfillment. And it's interesting to see how this encouragement to marry is balanced with an understanding that not everyone is in the same position.
You mean like those who might not be financially ready for marriage?
Exactly. For those who couldn't afford to marry the Prophet, peace be upon him, recommended fasting as a way to manage their desires. He acknowledged that not everyone's in the same place financially,
Hmm.
you know. Yet the importance of managing those desires in a healthy way remains crucial.
So it's like marriage is presented as this ideal path, but there's this recognition that, it's not always immediately attainable for everyone.
Precisely, and this leads us to another interesting point. The Prophet's discouragement of celibacy, peace be upon him. There's that well-known story of Uthman bin Mazun, who expressed a desire to devote himself entirely to worship and abstain from marriage.
And the Prophet, peace be upon him, wasn't having it.
He rejected that idea, emphasizing that marriage is part of fulfilling life in Islam. What's fascinating is the strong reaction this caused among the companions. Saad B. Abi Waqqas, Allah be pleased with him, even remarked that they would have castrated themselves if the Prophet had allowed it.
Wow, that's pretty intense. It really shows how seriously they took the Prophet's teachings, peace be upon him.
The story really underscores the significance of marriage, not just as a personal choice, but as a part of fulfilling one's purpose in life, both individually and within the community.
Okay, now let's talk about this hadith that I think a lot of people will find relatable. It's the one where the Prophet, peace be upon him, advises a man who's attracted to another woman to go home and be intimate with his wife.
This hadith, narrated by Jabir, Allah be pleased with him, offers really practical advice on handling attraction outside of marriage. It acknowledges the reality that even within a committed relationship, a person might be drawn to someone else.
It's very human right.
Mm.
We can't always control those initial feelings of attraction, but the hadith doesn't just leave you hanging with those feelings. It offers a way to deal with them constructively.
Right, rather than letting those feelings fester and potentially lead to something haram, the hadith encourages channeling that energy back into the marriage. It's like hitting a reset button, redirecting those desires to where they belong.
I find that really insightful. It's almost like recognizing that attraction is natural.
Yeah.
It's what you do with it that matters.
Exactly, and it speaks to the importance of open communication and intimacy within a marriage. This hadith encourages couples to address these feelings head-on rather than suppressing them or letting them create distance. It emphasizes the importance of physical intimacy as a means of strengthening the marital bond and rekindling that connection between spouses.
And that ties in beautifully to this idea of Ihsan, striving for excellence in all aspects of life, including marriage.
Yes, it's about approaching marriage not just as a duty, but as an opportunity for continuous growth and connection.
Okay, now for a topic that I know sparks a lot of discussion, temporary marriage or muta.
Yeah, this is one where historical context is really important. Initially, temporary marriage was permitted likely as a pragmatic solution to address specific circumstances.
I remember reading about those companions who were on an expedition without their wives, and they were really struggling with their desires to the point of asking the Prophet, peace be upon him, if they should castrate themselves.
Yes, that story illustrates their commitment to staying within the boundaries of what is permissible in Islam, and their desperate plea prompted the Prophet, peace be upon him, to allow temporary marriage, even suggesting a garment be given as dower. It highlights the sensitivity and the practicality within Islamic rulings, adapting to the needs of the time.
So it was allowed then, but what happened?
The practice continued during the time of the first two caliphs, Abu Bakr and Umar. However, Umar later forbade it, and eventually the Prophet, peace be upon him, prohibited it altogether. There are different opinions about the reasons for this change, but the final ruling is that temporary marriage is considered haram in Sunni Islam.
And it's important to clarify that, right? We're focusing specifically on the Sunni perspective here.
Absolutely. It's crucial to acknowledge that other branches of Islam may hold different views on this matter, but based on the hadiths that we're discussing, the final ruling is clear: temporary marriage is not permissible.
Okay, so moving on. The Hadiths also lay out some specific prohibitions against marrying certain relatives.
Yes. For example, marrying a woman and her father's sister or a woman and her mother's sister is strictly forbidden. These prohibitions are based on maintaining family harmony and preventing those potential conflicts that could arise from such unions.
It makes sense you wouldn't want to create awkwardness or tension within the family structure.
Exactly. These rules help to create clear boundaries and roles within kinship relationships, promoting respect and healthy interactions among family members.
It's like creating a framework for those relationships to flourish without any unnecessary complications.
You got it. And this focus on clear boundaries and respectful conduct extends to the etiquette of proposals as well.
Oh, right. There are those Hadiths about a muhrim, which, for our listeners who might not know, is someone who's in the state of Ihram during Hajj, being forbidden from marrying, arranging marriages, or even making marriage proposals.
That's right. The state of Iram requires a heightened level of spiritual focus and purity, so engaging in worldly matters like marriage is considered inappropriate during this sacred time. It's about prioritizing spiritual devotion during Hajj.
So it's like pressing pause on those worldly concerns to fully dedicate yourself to the pilgrimage.
Exactly. It's fascinating how these teachings provide guidance even for these really specific situations, and this emphasis on respect and consideration is also evident in that hadith about proposing to a woman who has already received a proposal from someone else.
Oh, that's right. It's considered unethical to propose to someone when another proposal is already on the table, unless you have the first person's permission or they withdraw their proposal.
Precisely, it's about prioritizing fairness and avoiding unnecessary competition or heartache. These guidelines emphasize the importance of treating marriage as a sacred bond, not something to be taken lightly or pursued aggressively.
There seems to be a real concern for protecting everyone's feelings and ensuring things are done honorably.
Absolutely. The sanctity of marriage and the respect due to all involved is paramount, and this brings us to another type of marriage that strictly prohibited the shigar marriage.
Refresh my memory. What does shigar entail?
It's a practice where two men exchange their daughters or sisters in marriage without any dower being paid. Essentially, it reduces women to commodities in a bartering system.
It sounds incredibly dehumanizing.
It is, and Islam strictly forbids this practice. The emphasis on the dower, which we'll get to in a bit, signifies the respect and value placed on the woman in a marriage. This concept of shigar completely disregards that.
It really highlights the importance of consent and agency for women, which I think is a great transition to this next set of hadiths. It emphasizes the necessity of seeking a woman's consent before marriage.
That's a critical point. The hadiths distinguish between a virgin and a non-virgin regarding how consent is given for a non-virgin. Verbal consent is mandatory for a virgin. Her silence in the presence of her guardian is considered consent.
That's interesting. Why the difference?
It likely reflects the societal norms at the time in that culture. A virgin might have felt too shy or pressured to verbally express her consent, so her silence, along with her guardian's assurance of her willingness, was deemed sufficient.
But it's important to emphasize that this doesn't mean her opinion is irrelevant.
Oh, right.
Right.
The emphasis is still on ensuring she's not being forced into marriage against her will. Her guardian has the responsibility to ascertain her willingness, even if it's expressed through silence.
It's crucial to view these teachings within their historical context and understand how societal norms have evolved.
Absolutely. Our understanding of consent has definitely progressed over time. It's important to approach these hadiths with sensitivity and understand that the core principle is protecting a woman's right to choose whom she marries.
Okay, so we've talked about consent now. Let's talk about another important element, the dower or mar. This is a mandatory gift from the husband to the wife, correct?
Yes, it's a symbol of the husband's commitment and a way of honoring the woman he is marrying. The dower can be anything agreed upon by both parties. There's a hadith where a man of very limited means offered his lower garment as dower. This shows his sincere desire to fulfill this obligation despite his financial constraints.
That's a pretty humble offering. It speaks to the sincerity of his intention.
It does, however, the Prophet, peace be upon him, guided him toward a more suitable solution, suggesting he teach the woman part of the Quran as dower. This highlights the value placed on knowledge and spirituality within Islam. It's a beautiful example of how, even in situations of poverty, fulfilling this obligation is possible.
It shifts the focus from material wealth to something much deeper and more meaningful. What about the Prophet's own dowers to his wives? Peace be upon him were those mentioned.
Yes, they were. The Hadith tells us that the Prophet's dower, peace be upon him, to his wives was 12 uqiyas and 1 nash, which is equivalent to 500 dirhams. This provides some context and a point of reference.
It also demonstrates that even the Prophet, peace be upon him, who held such a high position, adhered to this obligation.
Exactly. It emphasizes that the dower is an integral part of the marriage contract, regardless of one's social standing or wealth.
And then there's this fascinating story of the Prophet, peace be upon him, emancipating and marrying Safiya bint Huyay, who was taken captive during the Battle of Khaybar. What insights can we glean from that event?
This story offers a glimpse into the treatment of captives and the complexities of marriage during wartime. Safiya was initially received by another companion as part of the spoils of war, but the Prophet, peace be upon him, intervened, ultimately choosing to marry her after freeing her, and what's remarkable is that her emancipation was considered part of her dower.
So her freedom itself became like the most valuable gift he could offer.
Precisely, it speaks volumes about the Prophet's character, peace be upon him, and his commitment to justice and compassion. It shows how Islam sought to elevate the status of women, even those considered captives in times of war.
And their wedding feast was incredibly simple, right?
It consisted of dates, cheese, and refined butter. This highlights the humility and lack of extravagance that marked the Prophet's lifestyle, peace be upon him.
It reinforces this idea that marriage is about that sacred bond between two people, not about lavish displays or material possessions.
Absolutely. It serves as a reminder to prioritize simplicity and spirituality over material wealth, even during celebratory occasions.
And then there's the story of Zainab bint Josh, who was initially married to Zayd, the Prophet's adopted son.
This story is particularly significant because it challenged those prevalent social norms and eventually led to the revelation of crucial verses in the Quran.
If I remember correctly, Zainab's marriage to Zayd ended, and then the Prophet, peace be upon him, married her.
Yes, it was a bold step that broke social stigmas associated with marrying one's former daughter-in-law.
I can imagine that raised some eyebrows at the time.
It definitely did, but it was a deliberate action by the Prophet, peace be upon him, meant to dismantle those societal prejudices. It was a practical demonstration that lineage through adoption doesn't carry the same weight as blood ties.
And this event ultimately led to the revelation of verses about hijab.
It did. These verses outline the etiquette of visiting the Prophet's household, peace be upon him, and emphasize the importance of modesty and privacy. So this event had a profound impact on the development of social norms within the Muslim community.
It's incredible how these hadiths offer a window into the social and historical context of the time, providing valuable insight into how these teachings were understood and applied.
They paint such a rich tapestry, allowing us to understand these teachings within the context of the Prophet's life, peace be upon him, and the development of the early Muslim community. And we've only just scratched the surface. There's still so much wisdom and guidance to glean from these hadiths.
Well, this has certainly been a fascinating exploration so far. I'm eager to dive into more of these hadiths with you.
It's amazing how these hadiths offer such practical guidance on like various aspects of married life. It's not just about the spiritual dimension, but also the social and communal aspects.
You're absolutely right. And speaking of the communal aspect, we have this next set of hadiths about accepting invitations to wedding feasts. They really highlight the importance of celebrating together as a community.
You know, you're right. Accepting these invitations is strongly encouraged.
Yeah, I noticed
It is. Muslims are urged to accept wedding invitations, even if they happen to be fasting. It shows the significance of sharing in these joyful occasions and supporting the newly married couple. And it's not just about attending, it's about actively participating in the celebration and offering your blessings to the couple.
Yeah, it's like a public acknowledgement of this new union and a way of welcoming them into this new chapter of their lives.
Precisely. And what I find particularly striking is this emphasis on inclusivity. It's considered a sin to ignore invitations or to only invite the wealthy, while excluding the poor.
That's a powerful reminder about social justice and the importance of treating everyone equally.
Exactly. It goes beyond mere courtesy. It's about fostering a sense of community where everyone feels valued and included, regardless of their social standing. It reflects the Islamic principle of equality and brotherhood.
Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about divorce. The Hadith mentions the waiting period, or iddah, that a woman observes after her marriage has ended, either through divorce or the death of her husband.
Yes, the Ida is a crucial period of transition, and it serves multiple purposes, first and foremost. It provides a time for reflection and emotional healing for the woman.
It's like a buffer period, allowing her to process those changes and adjust to her new reality.
Exactly. It gives her space to grieve the loss of the marriage and to move forward at her own pace. Another important purpose is to conclusively establish paternity if the woman happens to be pregnant.
Oh, so it prevents any uncertainty about the lineage of the child and protects the rights of both the child and the potential father.
You got it.
Yeah.
And lastly, the IDA offers the couple a window of opportunity for reconciliation if they choose to rekindle their relationship.
It's like a built-in pause to allow for reflection and potentially give that marriage a second chance.
Yes, it acknowledges the complexities of human relationships and that feelings can change over time.
There's that specific hadith about a woman who's been divorced 3 times.
Right.
And it states that she can't remarry her previous husband until she marries another man, consummates the marriage, and then is divorced by him completing her Ida period. That seems rather complicated. What's the reasoning behind that particular ruling?
It's a safeguard against rash decisions and potential abuse by requiring the woman to experience another marriage entirely. It ensures that her decision to return to her previous husband is not made out of desperation or social pressure.
It's like a test of her resolve, making sure that reconciliation is truly what she desires and not just a reaction to her circumstances.
Yes, it prioritizes her well-being and protects her from being trapped in a cycle of impulsive marriages and divorces.
It's interesting to note that these hadiths don't explicitly forbid divorce.
That's true. While marriage is considered a sacred bond, Islam recognizes that there are situations where divorce becomes a necessity. This particular hadith, for example, acknowledges the possibility of divorce, but it adds a layer of precaution, especially in cases of repeated divorces.
So while divorce is allowed, it's not to be taken lightly. It's a decision that should be made after careful consideration and with a focus on preserving the marriage whenever possible.
Exactly. It's about striking a balance between acknowledging the realities of human relationships and upholding the sanctity of marriage. The emphasis is on preserving the family unit, but recognizing that sometimes separation is in the best interests of all involved.
Okay, now I'd like to explore some of the more intimate aspects of marriage. I was particularly struck by the hadith that mentions a specific supplication to be recited during intercourse.
Yes, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, advised reciting this supplication before engaging in intimacy with one's spouse.
And what's the significance of this supplication?
It serves a couple of purposes. First, it's about seeking protection from Satan and any negative influences that might disrupt the sanctity of that marital bond. And second, it's about invoking Allah's blessings upon any child that might be conceived as a result of the union.
It's beautiful how it brings a spiritual dimension to this act of intimacy.
It's a reminder that even in our most private moments, we should be mindful of Allah and seek His guidance and protection. It's about infusing even these intimate acts with a sense of sacredness and purpose.
It also underscores the importance of children within the Islamic tradition, seeing them as a blessing from Allah and a source of joy and reward.
Yes, the supplication embodies that aspiration for righteous offspring and reflects the belief that children are a gift from Allah entrusted to parents to raise in accordance with His teachings.
Now, I recall the Quran uses a rather interesting analogy describing wives as being like a tilth for their husbands.
That's right. It's an analogy that requires some context to fully understand it, emphasizes the importance of intimacy and procreation within marriage, but it's crucial to interpret it correctly.
And the hadith provides further clarification, stating that intercourse is permissible from the front or behind as long as it's through the vagina.
Exactly. The Hadith provides specific guidelines and boundaries within the realm of marital intimacy, and it's important to understand that this is about providing guidance on the physical act itself, not about a husband's overall treatment of his wife.
Right. It's not a license for disrespect or coercion in any way.
Absolutely not. The emphasis within Islamic teachings is on mutual respect, consideration, and pleasure for both partners within the bounds of what is halal. And this idea of respect and safeguarding one's spouse extends to the topic of confidentiality in marriage.
Oh, that's right. There's that hadith that warns against divulging intimate details about one's spouse.
Yes, it's considered a major breach of trust to share those private moments with others. It's about creating a safe and sacred space within the marriage where both partners feel comfortable being vulnerable and sharing their deepest thoughts and feelings without fear of judgment or exposure.
It's about protecting the sanctity and privacy of that marital relationship.
Exactly. And this principle not only safeguards the couple's emotional intimacy, but also prevents gossip and potential harm to their reputation and relationship within the community.
Now, here's a topic that I know often generates a lot of discussion and even debate. Coitus interruptus, also known as live. What guidance do the hadiths offer on this practice?
This is one of those topics where the prophet's response was nuanced and open to interpretation. Peace be upon him. The hadith reveals that the companions inquired about the permissibility of esli, which is the act of withdrawing before ejaculation as a means of contraception.
So it's clearly a practice that was on their minds and something they were seeking clarification on.
Yes, it was definitely a point of concern for them, and the prophet's response is quite fascinating past him. Peace be upon him, he didn't explicitly forbid it, stating that every soul destined to be born will be born regardless of human intervention.
It's almost like acknowledging Allah's ultimate power over creation and destiny.
Exactly. It's a reminder that we can plan and try to control outcomes, but ultimately, Allah has the final say. However, the Prophet, peace be upon him, also hinted that it wasn't the preferred course of action.
It's like saying, you're allowed to do this, but it might not be the best choice. So how has this hadith been interpreted?
There are different schools of thought on this, but it's generally understood that while azl might not be strictly forbidden, it's best to avoid it unless there are compelling reasons. Those reasons might include serious health risks for the wife due to pregnancy or extreme financial hardship where the couple feels genuinely unable to care for another child.
So it's about weighing the potential harms and benefits considering the individual circumstances of the couple and making a responsible decision based on what's best for their family.
Yes, that's a really great way to put it. It's about responsible family planning within the framework of Islamic guidelines. It's fascinating how these hadiths delve into such practical and even personal matters.
They really do offer guidance for virtually every aspect of married life, from the celebratory moments of a wedding feast to the challenges of divorce and even the intimacies of the marital bed. It's truly a holistic approach.
It is, and what's amazing is how these teachings, though rooted in a specific time and context, still offer timeless wisdom and principles that we can apply to our modern lives. There's always something to learn and reflect upon.
And I feel like we've only just begun to uncover the depth and richness of these hadiths. I can't wait to delve further into what they have to teach us about fostering truly fulfilling and meaningful marriages. What do you say we take a short break and come back for our final exploration of Sahih Muslim Book 8?
Sounds great. I'm eager to continue our conversation and see what other gems we can unearth. See you on the other side, listeners.
I'm really intrigued by this next topic, fosterage. It's something that might not be familiar to everyone listening. Can you explain what it means in the Islamic context?
Of course, fosterage, or rida in Arabic, refers to the act of breastfeeding a child who's not one's biological offspring. And in Islam, this act creates a special bond that carries certain prohibitions similar to those found in blood relationships.
So if a woman breastfeeds another woman's child, they become like siblings, and marriage between them or their close relatives is forbidden.
That's right. This concept highlights the significance Islam places on nurturing and caregiving. It acknowledges that the bond formed through breastfeeding can be as strong and meaningful as a biological connection. It really expands the definition of family beyond blood ties.
That's fascinating. It's like saying that family isn't just about who you're related to biologically, but also about who plays a significant role in your upbringing and care.
Exactly. It acknowledges those diverse ways in which relationships are formed and the importance of honoring those bonds, and the hadiths offer specific examples to illustrate how this concept works in practice.
Like the story about Aisha, the Prophet's wife, and her foster uncle Afla.
That's a great example. Aflal wanted to visit Aisha, but she initially refused him entry because of the rules of seclusion that were in place. However, when she consulted the Prophet about it, he instructed her to allow Afla in explaining that he was considered a maham, a relative through fosterage, because he had breastfed her as a child.
So even though they weren't related by blood, this act of breastfeeding created a familial bond that made it permissible for him to visit her. It really shows how this concept of fosterage impacts social interactions and defines boundaries within the Muslim community.
Absolutely. It demonstrates how these principles are applied in everyday life. And there's another compelling hadith where the Prophet himself, peace be upon him, was offered marriage to the daughter of Hamza, A close companion, however, he declined the proposal because Hamza's wife had breastfed him in his infancy.
Wow, that's powerful. It shows the Prophet's commitment to upholding these principles, even when it came to his personal life.
Exactly. He clearly stated that marrying Hamza's daughter was not permissible for him. Because of that foster relationship established through breastfeeding, it underscores the seriousness of these rules and how they applied even at the highest level of society.
Now, there's also this question of how many instances of breastfeeding are required to establish fosterage. Is there a specific number?
That's a great question. Initially, the Quran mentioned 10 instances of breastfeeding as the threshold. However, this was later clarified and reduced to 5.
So 5 or more instances of breastfeeding create a foster relationship with the same prohibitions as blood ties, but like 1 or 2 instances wouldn't have the same effect.
That's correct. There's a hadith narrated by al-Fadl where a man approached the Prophet inquiring about his wife's claim that she had breastfed his newly married wife once or twice. The Prophet responded that 1 or 2 instances of breastfeeding don't establish a foster relationship that would make the marriage unlawful. It had to be a more significant and sustained act of nurturing.
It makes sense that there was a need for clarity and specificity around these rules. As new situations arose, those gray areas needed to be addressed.
Absolutely. These hadiths reflect the ongoing process of interpreting and applying Islamic teachings to real-life situations. They provide practical guidelines for navigating the complexities of family relationships and ensure clarity around permissible and prohibited marriages. It's all about safeguarding the integrity of family structures and preventing any potential harm or confusion.
Now, this next hadith is one that I find particularly fascinating. Is the story of Salah bint Suhail and Salim, her husband's freed slave. Can you tell us about that one?
Of course, this hadith highlights the flexibility and nuanced understanding within Islamic law. Salah was concerned about Salim living in the same household as her and her husband. She was worried about potential perceptions and her husband's reaction to Salim's presence.
So she went to the Prophet for guidance on how to handle this delicate situation.
She did, and the Prophet, in his wisdom, advised her to breastfeed Salim.
Wait, you mean he suggested she breastfeed a grown man? That seems a bit unusual.
It does seem unusual from our modern perspective. However, it's important to remember that cultural context of the time, by breastfeeding Salim, he became her foster son, creating a familial bond that alleviated any concerns about impropriety or awkwardness. It was a practical solution that addressed her specific concerns while adhering to the spirit of Islamic law.
That's incredible. It's like finding a creative solution within the framework of those guiding principles.
It's a great example of how Islamic rulings are not meant to be rigid or inflexible. They're meant to provide a framework for navigating life's complexities with compassion and wisdom. The focus is always on finding solutions that promote harmony, respect, and well-being within the family structure.
It shows the Prophet's ability to consider individual circumstances and provide guidance that was sensitive to those specific needs.
Absolutely. And it serves as a reminder that seeking knowledge and understanding is essential for applying these teachings correctly in our own lives.
Now, shifting gears a bit, the hadiths also emphasize the importance of choosing a pious spouse. There's one that really stood out to me where a pious woman is described as the best provision in this world.
That's a beautiful hadith, isn't it? It
Yeah.
speaks volumes about the value of having a righteous and supportive partner in life. It emphasizes this idea that a spouse is not just a companion, but a source of strength, comfort, and guidance on one's spiritual journey. A pious spouse can help you grow closer to Allah and navigate life's challenges with grace and faith.
It makes you think about the qualities you should prioritize when seeking a life partner. It's not just about superficial attraction or compatibility, but about finding someone who shares your values and strengthens your connection to your faith.
Exactly. And it's not just about finding a pious spouse, it's about striving to be a pious spouse ourselves, embodying those qualities that we seek in a partner.
And to wrap things up, I want to touch on the Prophet's advice on how to treat women. That hadith where he compares women to ribs naturally curved really resonated with me.
That's a powerful analogy, isn't it? It encourages men to approach women with gentleness, understanding, and a recognition of their inherent differences. It's about appreciating and accepting those differences rather than trying to force them into a mold that doesn't fit.
It's about recognizing that strength lies in embracing those differences and supporting each other's unique qualities.
Absolutely. It speaks to the essence of true partnership, where both individuals feel valued, respected, and cherished for who they truly are. Marriage flourishes when those differences are celebrated, not suppressed.
So as we conclude our deep dive into Sahih Muslim Book 8, What stands out to you the most about the Islamic perspective on marriage?
What strikes me most is that holistic nature of these teachings. They encompass every aspect of this sacred union, from choosing a spouse and fulfilling that marriage contract to nurturing intimacy, resolving conflicts, and building a loving and supportive partnership. It's about so much more than just the legalities. It's about cultivating a bond that is pleasing to Allah and fosters personal and spiritual growth for both individuals.
It's been an incredible journey exploring these hadiths and uncovering the wisdom they contain. They offer such relevant and timeless guidance for anyone seeking to build a strong, fulfilling, and spiritually grounded marriage.
And as we reflect on these teachings, a question worth pondering is this: how can we apply these principles to our modern lives and relationships, ensuring that our marriages are founded on faith, respect, and love?
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it's given you valuable insights and inspired you to further explore the beauty and wisdom of the Islamic tradition when it comes to marriage. Until next time, may your hearts be filled with the light of knowledge and your paths illuminated by the guidance of the Prophet, peace be upon him.